When my son died, I thought the world had ended. Then his business partner called me 4 days after we buried him. "Mr. Lawson, I found something in Michael's desk. A locked box with your name on it. You need to come to Calgary immediately. And please, whatever you do, don't tell your daughter-in-law. I think she's been lying to all of us." Those words sent ice through my veins. What could possibly be in that box? But when I flew out and saw what my boy had hidden there, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I had to sit down before I collapsed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. I stood in the February cold at Mountain View Cemetery, watching the last mourners drift away to their cars. My wife Susan had passed from cancer 6 years ago, and now my only child, my Michael, lay in the frozen ground beside her. 48 years old, strong as an ox, dead from what they called diabetic ketoacidosis during a business trip to Banff. His wife Rachel stood near the chapel entrance, accepting condolences with a tissue pressed to her eyes. She wore a black designer coat that cost more than my pension check. She'd always been polished, always said the right things. But something about the way she kept glancing at her phone made my gut twist. A man approached her. Young, maybe 35, wearing an expensive watch that caught the gray winter light. They spoke briefly, heads close together, and I saw her squeeze his hand before he walked away. Rachel caught me watching and smiled sadly, dabbed her eyes, walked over. "Dad, why don't you come back to the house with us? You shouldn't be alone right now." I shook my head. "I'll drive myself. Need some time." The truth was, I couldn't stand being near her. Not now. Not until I understood why Michael had called me 8 days before he died, his voice tight with something I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Fear. He'd said he needed to tell me something important, something about Rachel, but she was pulling into the driveway, and he had to go. He'd promised to call back that night. He never did. The house in Calgary felt wrong without him in it. Rachel had insisted I stay in the guest room rather than fly back to my place in Victoria. "We're family, Dad," she'd said, gripping my arm. "We need each other now." But I noticed things. The way her tears seemed to start and stop on command. The phone calls she took in the bedroom with the door locked. The way she'd already removed Michael's clothes from the closet, his toiletries from the bathroom, like she was erasing him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house at 2 in the morning, and I heard her talking in the kitchen. Her voice was sharp, irritated. "I told you, the insurance company said 6 to 8 weeks minimum. Stop calling me. We'll have everything by April." I moved away before she heard me. The next morning, David Chen called, Michael's business partner of 12 years. They'd built a successful software consulting firm together, with contracts across Alberta and British Columbia. David's voice was calm but urgent. "Mr. Lawson, I need you to come to the office. Today, if possible. Don't tell Rachel." I found an excuse. Told Rachel I was meeting an old colleague from my RCMP days. She barely looked up from her laptop. "Sure, Dad, take your time. I have calls anyway." David's office was in a converted heritage building downtown. He met me at the security desk, checked the parking lot behind me, then led me to a private conference room. I found this yesterday when I was going through Michael's desk. He placed a metal lockbox on the table. He gave me the spare key 3 weeks ago, told me if anything ever happened to him, I should give this to you. Only you. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, photographs, page after page of evidence that made my stomach turn. Rachel had been moving money from their joint accounts for over 18 months. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, then larger. The total exceeded $230,000. The transfers went to an account under the name S. Morrison. "Who is S. Morrison?" I asked. David pulled up a photo on his tablet. "Sean Morrison. The man at the funeral. The one with the watch. He's a pharmacist. They've been having an affair for almost 3 years. There was more. Michael had discovered everything. He'd hired a forensic accountant, quietly documented every transaction, and was preparing to confront Rachel and file for divorce. He'd changed the beneficiaries on all his policies and accounts to me 2 weeks before he died. But it was the letter tucked in with the documents that broke me. Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me. I don't want to sound paranoid, but Rachel has been acting strange since I told her I wanted a divorce. She keeps asking about my diabetes management, keeps suggesting I try new insulin brands, keeps pushing me to increase my life insurance. She doesn't know I've already changed everything to your name. I'm scared, Dad. Not for myself, but because I think she might be planning something. I've been feeling off lately. Dizzy, confused, like my blood sugar is all over the place, even when I'm careful. Sean Morrison is a pharmacist. He has access to insulin. Please, if something happens to me, don't let them get away with it. I love you, Michael. I read his words 4 times. My boy who used to sit beside me while I cleaned my service weapon, asking 1,000 questions. Who called me every Sunday morning without fail. Who had been afraid, alone, and hadn't told me how serious it was. David was pale. I should have done something. He told me he was worried about Rachel, but I thought he was just stressed about the divorce. I didn't think she would actually. I looked at the date on Michael's letter, January 22nd. He died February 3rd. I drove to the Calgary Police Service headquarters that afternoon, asked to speak with whoever handled my son's case. They sent me to Detective Karen Oduya, a sharp-eyed woman who listened without interrupting as I spread Michael's folder across her desk. Mr. Lawson, she said carefully, I understand your suspicions, but your son's death was ruled natural causes. Diabetic ketoacidosis. He'd been managing type 1 diabetes for 20 years. The medical examiner found his blood sugar was dangerously high, consistent with missed insulin doses or illness. He never missed a dose in his life. He was religious about it. And he was healthy, just had a checkup 2 months ago. Detective Oduya nodded slowly. That does happen sometimes with diabetics. Unexpected complications. My son was murdered. I kept my voice steady, the way I'd learned in 32 years with the RCMP. I know it. This folder proves motive. She was stealing from him. She's having an affair with a pharmacist. Michael was about to expose everything. They killed him. Oduya studied the documents again. This shows financial fraud and infidelity. Serious, yes, but it doesn't prove murder. Without evidence of how she might have caused his death, she spread her hands. My hands are tied, Mr. Lawson. I'm sorry. I left the station knowing I was on my own. 32 years in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the last 15 in major crimes. I'd investigated homicides across 3 provinces. I knew how killers thought, how they planned, how they made mistakes. I just needed time and access. For the next week, I played the grieving father perfectly. Let Rachel comfort me. Accepted her offers of tea and sympathy. Asked her advice about handling Michael's affairs. On the 3rd day, I mentioned needing help sorting through his belongings. Rachel jumped at the opportunity. Of course, Dad. Whatever you need. But her helpfulness was selective. She steered me away from his home office, from the filing cabinet in the basement, from anything that might contain more evidence. She'd already been through everything. I waited, watched, documented. Rachel's pattern became clear. Every Monday and Wednesday evening, she left for what she called grief counseling sessions. But the sessions lasted 4 hours, and she came back flushed, distracted, smelling of cologne. On the 2nd Wednesday, I followed her. She drove to a townhouse complex in the Beltline district. I parked across the street and watched her enter Unit 47. Sean Morrison opened the door. They embraced before it closed. I photographed everything with a camera I'd bought that morning. Dates, times, license plates, every detail. The way I'd taught young officers to document evidence decades ago. That evening, Rachel made dinner. She seemed relaxed, almost cheerful. She actually hummed while setting the table. The audacity of it made my blood boil, but I smiled, thanked her for the meal, asked about her day. I've been thinking, Dad. She refilled my wine glass. This house is too big for me alone. Maybe I should sell it, start fresh somewhere. That seems sudden. Michael always wanted to travel. Maybe I'll honor his memory by seeing the world. Her smile was wide, sincere-looking. Life's short, right? I nodded, thinking about the insurance payout she was expecting. $2.4 million. Thinking about Sean and their plans. Thinking about my son's last terrified weeks in this very house. After she went to bed, I searched. In her nightstand, I found a burner phone. The contacts showed only one number, labeled S. The text messages made my vision blur with rage. December 15th. Insurance increase went through. We're set. January 18th. He's getting suspicious. Moving up timeline. January 28th. Package ready. Modified concentration. February 3rd. Done. Remember to cry. At the hospital. I photographed every message, then put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Package. Modified concentration. My mind raced through the possibilities. Sean was a pharmacist. He had access to medications, to insulin, to the knowledge of exactly how to manipulate dosages. The next morning, I told Rachel I needed to fly back to Victoria for a few days. Check on my house, sort some paperwork. She offered to drive me to the airport. Take care of yourself, Dad. We'll get through this together. I flew to Victoria, stayed one night, then flew back to Calgary under a different reservation. I rented a car using cash and checked into a hotel near the university. My first call was to a private investigator I'd worked with during my RCMP years. Frank Savard, former Sûreté du Québec, one of the best in Western Canada. I showed him everything. The bank records, the text messages, the surveillance photos, Michael's letter. Frank studied each document, his expression growing darker by the minute. This is premeditated murder, Robert. They planned this for months, but we need the physical evidence. What do I need? Proof of how they did it. The insulin he used, dosage records, anything linking the modified concentration to your son's death. And we need to know if there's anything in Michael's system that shouldn't be there. They did a standard autopsy. Nothing flagged. Frank nodded. Standard panels don't test for insulin manipulation in a known diabetic. They just see high blood sugar and assume he missed his doses. He leaned forward. We need to get those samples retested, specifically for exogenous insulin markers. There are ways to tell if someone was given a different type or amount than their prescribed regimen. I knew the process. As next of kin, I could authorize additional testing on retained tissue samples. It would take time, but it was possible. While we waited for the test results, Frank surveilled Rachel and Sean. His reports came daily, detailed, damning. They met constantly. They discussed their plans openly, confident no one was listening. They talked about how they'd wait 6 months, then announce their relationship. They even looked at real estate listings in Portugal. Insurance money is coming through in 3 weeks, Rachel said in a conversation Frank recorded from a parked van. 2.4 million. We're finally free. Sean's response. I've been waiting 3 years for this. We can disappear. Start over. No one will ever know. But someone did know. Someone was documenting every word. The toxicology results arrived on March 19th. I was in my hotel room when Frank called. Robert, you need to sit down. The report showed elevated levels of insulin that didn't match Michael's prescribed type. More specifically, it showed traces of a rapid-acting insulin analog that Michael had never been prescribed. Someone had been giving him concentrated doses of a different insulin, causing his blood sugar to spike and crash unpredictably. The final dose, likely administered in his hotel room in Banff, had been massive, fatal. My son hadn't died from mismanaging his diabetes. My son had been poisoned by the woman he'd trusted with his life. I sat in that hotel room reading the report, and I wept, not just from grief, though the grief was crushing, but from the cold, clinical certainty of what Michael had suffered. Confusion, dizziness, the terrifying feeling of his body failing while he didn't understand why. And in those final hours, maybe he'd realized. Maybe he'd known. I hope he didn't. I hope he went peacefully, unaware. Frank arranged a meeting with Detective Oduya. This time, I brought everything. The bank records showing years of theft. The text messages discussing timelines and packages. The surveillance footage of their affair. The pharmacy records Frank had obtained, showing Sean had ordered unusual quantities of rapid-acting insulin. And most importantly, The toxicology report proving Michael was killed with insulin he'd never been prescribed. Oduya read each document carefully. Her face changed as the evidence mounted. When she reached the text message from February 3rd, she looked up. Done. Remember to cry at the hospital. This is the day your son died. Yes. Oduya closed the folder. Mr. Lawson, I'm reopening this case as a homicide investigation. I'll need to keep all of this as evidence. Will you arrest them? Soon. But we need to do this right. Build an airtight case. Get warrants. Make sure nothing can be thrown out on a technicality. She met my eyes. Your son deserves justice done properly. I agreed to maintain my cover, to keep being the oblivious, grieving father. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. 2 weeks later, I was back at Rachel's house for what she thought was a dinner to discuss Michael's estate. The real purpose was keeping her occupied while police executed a search warrant at Sean Morrison's townhouse. Rachel had made salmon, Michael's favorite. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. So, Dad, she said, pouring wine, I've been thinking about Michael's share of the company. David offered to buy it out. Good money. Enough to help you retire comfortably. I pretended to consider it. That's generous. How much are we talking? She named a figure. I kept my expression neutral. What was really happening, I realized, was Rachel trying to liquidate everything quickly. She wanted the insurance, the business sale, the house. Then she and Sean would vanish before anyone asked questions. At 7:45, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, excused herself. I heard her voice rise from the other room. What do you mean they arrested Sean? What were they looking for? What do you mean evidence? She came back ashen. Dad, I need to go. Emergency. Can we finish this tomorrow? Of course. Everything okay? Fine. Just work stuff. A client issue. She left so quickly she forgot her purse. Frank called me an hour later. They found everything at Sean's place. Vials of insulin with modified concentrations, hidden in his garage freezer. Emails on his laptop discussing the plan in detail, dates, dosages, exactly how to make it look natural. Pharmacy records he thought he'd deleted. They're arresting Rachel tonight. I stood in my dead son's house, surrounded by his photographs, his books, the life he'd built that his wife had destroyed for money. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something besides grief. Rage. And beneath the rage, something quieter. Determination. April 14th. I sat in the gallery of the Calgary Court Center as Rachel was brought in, handcuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit. The polished trophy wife was gone. She looked haggard, desperate, aged a decade and a month. The charges were read. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud over $5,000, insurance fraud. Rachel pleaded not guilty, in a voice that cracked. Sean Morrison had been arrested 2 days earlier, caught trying to withdraw $50,000 from an account in the Cayman Islands. He'd crumbled within hours, offered to testify against Rachel in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted 4 weeks. I attended every day, sat in the same seat, let Rachel see me there, watching. The prosecution built their case brick by brick. The pharmacy records showing Sean ordered specialized insulin under false pretenses. The text messages discussing their timeline. Sean's tearful testimony about how Rachel had planned the murder for almost a year, researched untraceable methods, waited for Michael to increase his life insurance. Michael's letter was read aloud. His fear, his love, his desperate hope that I would find the truth and not let them win. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One woman openly sobbed. Rachel's defense tried to blame Sean, painting him as the mastermind. Rachel as a naive woman manipulated by a controlling lover. But the evidence was overwhelming. The text messages were on her phone. The financial records showed she initiated the transfers. The insurance increase had been her suggestion, documented in emails to their broker. And then there was the final witness, Sean's ex-girlfriend. A nurse named Amanda who testified that Sean had bragged to her about a rich client who wanted help getting rid of a problem. She'd thought he was joking. She'd broken up with him over it. She'd lived with guilt for 2 years, wondering if she should have reported it. On May 23rd, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. All counts. Rachel collapsed, had to be helped to her feet by the court officers. As they led her away, she looked at me for the first time since the trial began. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You never liked me. You turned Michael against me. You—" The officers pulled her through the door. Her voice echoed down the hallway, then faded. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years for Rachel. 20 years for Sean, who would be in his mid-50s when he got out, if he survived that long. The judge had noted his complete lack of remorse and cold calculation in designing the murder method. The judge addressed Rachel before pronouncing sentence. "You betrayed a man who loved you. You stole from him. You conspired to take his life for money. You showed Michael Lawson no mercy, no compassion, no basic human decency. This court shows you none in return." Rachel had nothing to say, just stood there, hollow, as her entire future collapsed into a prison cell. I gave no statements to the media afterward. There was nothing to say that would matter to anyone but me. I drove to the cemetery, knelt beside Michael's grave, next to Susan's. The May sun was warm, the grass finally green after the long Alberta winter. "I kept my promise, son. I found out what she did. She's going to prison for the rest of her useful life. Sean, too. They won't hurt anyone else." A magpie called from a nearby tree. The wind rustled through the poplars. "I miss you every day. Your mother would have been so proud of the man you became, the business you built, the way you faced the truth, even when you were afraid, even when you knew it might cost you everything." I touched his headstone, traced his name with my finger. "I love you, Michael. Always will." The insurance company voided Rachel's claim the moment charges were filed. She received nothing. Sean received nothing. Everything Michael had worked for, the business, the house, his investments, went exactly where he'd wanted. Half to David Chen to keep the company running, half to a foundation supporting diabetes research and education. It's what he would have wanted, helping others who lived with the same condition, making sure no one else died because someone exploited their vulnerability. I sold my house in Victoria and moved to a small place outside Kelowna. At 67, I finally retired from the consulting work I'd done since leaving the RCMP. But I didn't stop entirely. Detective Oduya connected me with families in similar situations. People who suspected their loved ones' deaths weren't accidents, weren't natural, weren't suicide, but couldn't get anyone to listen. Families told they were crazy with grief. Families gaslit by killers hiding in plain sight. I've helped 6 families in the past 2 years. Guided them through investigations. Connected them with forensic experts. Showed them how to document evidence the way I learned in 30 years of policing. 4 resulted in arrests. 2 are ongoing. My wife Susan used to say I was the most stubborn man she'd ever met. That once I decided something mattered, nothing on earth could stop me. She was right. Michael's death could have destroyed me. Instead, it gave me purpose. The justice system isn't perfect. It's slow. It's bureaucratic. It fails more often than any of us want to admit. But when you give it the right evidence, when you force it to see what's really there, when you refuse to let killers hide behind statistics and assumptions, it works. Rachel will be 72 before she's even eligible for parole. Sean will be 56. Neither of them will ever benefit from what they did to my son. That's not revenge. That's accountability. Last month, I got an email from a woman in Winnipeg. Her husband died last year, ruled an accidental medication interaction. But she'd found texts on his phone, discovered his business partner had been embezzling from their company, learned his life insurance had been increased 6 months before his death. She'd seen a news story about Michael's case. She'd recognized the pattern. She'd finally found the courage to go to police with what she'd found. They're reopening her husband's case as a suspicious death. I wrote back, told her I was sorry for her loss, told her she was brave, told her that finding the truth wouldn't bring her husband back, but it would mean his death mattered, that evil had consequences, that she wasn't imagining things. that the doubt and guilt and desperate hope she felt were exactly what I'd felt 2 years ago. That's what Michael would have wanted. Not justice for himself, but protection for others. Not revenge, but prevention. Making sure no one else suffered the way he did. Tonight, I sit on my deck in Kelowna, watching the sun set over Okanagan Lake. The mountains are still capped with snow, but the orchards in the valley are starting to bloom. Spring finally coming after another long winter. I think about Michael as a boy, learning to fish at this very lake. His patience, his quiet determination, the way he'd sit for hours waiting for a bite, never complaining. I think about Susan, who loved this view, who would have been devastated by what happened to our boy. I think about how close Rachel came to getting away with it. If David hadn't found that lockbox, if Michael hadn't been smart enough to document everything, if I'd been too old, too grief-stricken, too trusting to investigate, if I'd accepted the official story and gone back to Victoria and spent my remaining years wondering. But Michael was smart, and I wasn't too anything. And Rachel is spending the next quarter century in prison because she underestimated both of us. The grief doesn't go away. It never will. There's a hollow place in my chest where my son used to be, where Sunday morning calls used to be, where the future we'd planned, grandchildren maybe, family holidays, growing old with him nearby, used to live, but alongside the grief now is something else. Not satisfaction exactly, not peace, something quieter than either. Justice served, truth uncovered, a father's promise kept. Michael, wherever you are, I hope you know. I hope you know I never stopped fighting. I hope you know that everything you feared would be buried came into the light instead. I hope you know that your father loved you enough to tear apart the comfortable lie and expose the ugly truth beneath. That's what fathers do. We protect our children. Even after we've lost them, we carry their memory forward. We make sure their lives mattered. And yours did, son. Yours mattered more than I can ever say. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear another story, click on the video appearing on your screen now.